Alright guys, got another cool one for you today. Just want to talk about line. How important is line when it comes to fishing? I'd say it's very important. I don't think you could do it without it. But I'm going to go over a few little things about 3 different kinds of line that I personally use and when to use each one. Alright, so braid. What is braid exactly? Braid is basically a rope. It's about 0 stretch when you're throwing braid. And this line right here, you can pull it. I know it's probably hard for you guys to see, but you can pull this braid as hard as you want, 0 stretch whatsoever. So what does that mean? That means you want to throw this line with baits that you are trying to get a very, very good hookup ratio with. Obviously, you want a good hookup ratio on any bait, but long cast in particular, you want something that's not going to stretch as much, something that you're going to just drive that hook right into that fish without any line given. So mono, for example, is going to give a lot. Fluoro is going to give a little less, but braid is 0. Braid is going to drive that hook into that fish, get them in, get them on, get them in. So that's kind of the mindset of braid. So I like to use braid for frogging, spook, flipping, that sort of thing. When you're making very long casts, not making long casts flipping, but that fish is under so much stuff that you're trying to get that hook in them, drive that hook in them, get that fish over out of that mat, out of that junk, get that fish in the boat. That's kind of why you want to use braid. And then when you're, like I said, long cast with a spook, whatever it may be, you want to just get that hook into that fish and not so much stretch to where that hook will not drive all the way into that fish. But for example, you're using fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon is kind of one of those things. You can almost use it for anything. But, like I said, there's a few techniques I just used a second ago, like frogging, flipping, swim jigging, spook, long cast. Fluorocarbon is kind of very hard to, it's kind of hard to use because it's got a little more stretch into it, a little more give. Which that's all right though. Some things you want a little give, like Texas rig fishing. Fluorocarbon is the best line you could possibly use. I personally use shooter, 18-pound line. For the most part, I like to jack them. I like to let them have it and get them in the boat. And this line's perfect for that. Never really have any problems breaking off. Awesome line. Yeah, so you can pretty much use fluorocarbon for Texas rig. You can use it for crankbait. You can use it for spinnerbait, chatterbait, pretty much jerkbait. Any technique out there, for the most part, besides those techniques that you are trying to drive that hook into that fish on a very long cast, get them out, get them on, get them in, or flipping, for example. Now you can even flip with fluorocarbon, but I like to personally do it when there's not so much stuff in the interference, if that makes sense. So if I'm just flipping sniper trees, for example, and there's a really big fish in the lake, I may step it up to 20, 7/6 rod, get them, freaking flip it up there, jack them, get them in. But if I'm flipping under a mat of high sand or anything like that, that's when I'm going to step it up to braid, trying to get more of that hook penetration in that fish. That way I can get them on and get them in. But like I said, fluorocarbon pretty much goes with any technique out there besides just a couple. So yeah, kind of keep that in mind. If you ever want a little bit of stretch in that hook set, or not that hook set necessarily, but whenever you're throwing a Texas rig and you set the hook, if you don't have any stretch, so for example, if you're using braid on a Texas rig and you set the hook, there's 0 stretch. That hook's just going to bend right out. You're going to lose that fish. But like I said, with that braid, if you got a Texas rig hook on here and you set the hook, there's no stretch. For the most part, you're just going to bend that hook out if it's a light wire hook. Now with this fluorocarbon, light wire hook, you're good to go. Just don't set the hook as hard as you ever could set the hook, but just a good hook set, you're good to go with fluorocarbon. It'll get the job done. Now, when it comes to a mono, I personally do not use mono for a lot of things. I used to use it for a spinnerbait and a buzzbait, but I don't anymore. I just use fluorocarbon and braid for the most part. Now, I do have just a couple techniques that I use mono for, and for the most part, that's small top water. So popper, for example, maybe like just very small top waters with small treble hooks. Braid can bend those little hooks out if you don't have the right size rod. And me personally, for my top waters, I use very small rods. I go about as small as I can possibly get. That way that mono kind of matches that rod size, matches that hook size, if that makes any sense. to the point where it won't bend those hooks out, but it'll keep that fish pinned enough. It has just enough stretch to the point where lets that fish get it, but enough strength to where that hook still gets into that fish with the right size rod, and that gets the job done for me. So 3 pretty much simple things. We got mono for a couple techniques, fluorocarbon for about every technique out there besides just a few, and braid, like I said, for flipping, frogging, anything heavy duty, heavy rod. That's the 3 that I use. So hope that kind of helps you guys out a little bit. That's pretty much keeping it simple as it gets right there. So hope you guys enjoyed. If you could, leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what else you guys would like to see. Until then, we'll catch you on the next one.